For 30 years, Mary Thompson believed she was living the American dream in Asheville, North Carolina. A devoted husband, 3 beautiful daughters, a home filled with what she thought was love. But sometimes the most devastating betrayals happen in plain sight, hidden behind the most ordinary facades. What we're about to share is the true story of a woman who discovered that her entire marriage was built on a lie so profound it would destroy everything she believed about love, loyalty, and family. But this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about the impossible choice between the happiness you deserve and the family you can't bear to lose. In 1994, when Mary Thompson was 24 years old and believed she had found her soulmate, David Thompson was charming, ambitious, and seemed to offer everything she wanted in a life partner. Their wedding was everything Mary had dreamed of, a beautiful ceremony in the mountains of North Carolina, surrounded by family and friends who celebrated what appeared to be a perfect match. David's vows promised a lifetime of love, devotion, and partnership. "Mary," he said, holding her hands as tears of joy streamed down her face, "you are my heart, my future, my everything. I promise to love you faithfully for all the days of my life." The first few years seemed to fulfill those promises. David worked in construction management while Mary built a career in education. They bought their dream home in a quiet Asheville neighborhood, planted a garden together, talked about the children they would raise and the life they would build. Lauren arrived in 2001, bringing joy that seemed to strengthen their bond. When the twins, Emily and Grace, were born in 2004, Mary felt her life was complete. David appeared to be a devoted father, coaching Little League, attending school plays, taking family vacations that created memories Mary treasured. From the outside, the Thompsons looked like the ideal American family. David worked hard. Mary balanced career and motherhood. Their daughters were well-adjusted and successful in school. Neighbors saw them as a couple to admire, parents who had figured out how to make marriage and family life work. But as relationship experts say, the most devastating secrets often hide behind the most convincing public facades. The changes didn't happen overnight. Like most major betrayals, this one unfolded gradually, with signs that seemed explainable at the time. Around 2010, when Lauren was 9 and the twins were 6, Mary began noticing David's emotional withdrawal. The man who had once been affectionate and attentive became distant, distracted, often lost in his own thoughts. "Is everything okay?" Mary would ask when she found him staring out the window or scrolling through his phone with unusual intensity. "Just work stress," David would respond, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. You know how demanding the construction industry can be. More troubling was the gradual disappearance of physical affection. What had once been a marriage filled with casual touches, spontaneous kisses, and regular intimacy slowly became a relationship of careful distance. David began working longer hours, taking business trips that seemed more frequent than necessary, claiming exhaustion that made him unavailable for the emotional and physical connection Mary craved. By 2012, David had essentially moved into the guest bedroom, citing sleep problems and work schedules that made sharing a bed impractical. Mary accepted these explanations because the alternative, that her husband was actively avoiding intimacy with her, was too painful to consider. Like many women in failing marriages, Mary began questioning herself. Had she gained weight? Was she not interesting enough? Was the stress of raising 3 daughters making her less attractive to her husband? She tried everything: new clothes, different hairstyles, planning romantic dinners, suggesting couples activities. Nothing worked. David remained polite but distant, loving but unreachable. By 2015, Mary was living with a man who felt more like a respectful roommate than a husband. They functioned well as co-parents, coordinated household responsibilities efficiently, and maintain the appearance of a solid marriage. But Mary was profoundly lonely in her own home. 4 years ago in 2020, Mary's world shattered in a single afternoon. What she discovered wasn't just infidelity. It was a betrayal so complete it redefined her entire understanding of her marriage. It started with a phone call from David's doctor's office. Mary answered because David was at work, and the receptionist, assuming she was calling David's emergency contact, shared information that would change everything. "We need to schedule Mr. Thompson's follow-up appointment for his HIV monitoring," the receptionist said matter-of-factly. "His last blood work showed some concerning changes, and Dr. Patterson wants to see him next week." Mary stood in her kitchen holding the phone, certain there had been some mistake. HIV monitoring? David had never mentioned any health issues beyond occasional back pain from construction work. "I think you have the wrong person," Mary said, her voice barely steady. "My husband doesn't have HIV." The silence on the other end told Mary everything she needed to know. That evening, Mary confronted David with the phone call. What followed was a conversation that destroyed 26 years of what she thought was truth. David didn't just have HIV, he had been living with AIDS for several years. He had contracted it through relationships with men, relationships that had been ongoing throughout their entire marriage. "How long?" Mary whispered, sitting across from the man she thought she knew. "It's complicated. I never meant for this to happen." "How long, David?" The answer destroyed her. "From the beginning. I've always been attracted to men. But I loved you too. I thought I could make it work." 26 years of marriage built on a fundamental lie. David had not only been unfaithful, he had been living a completely different life, putting Mary's health at risk, lying about his very identity while she built her entire adult life around what she believed was their shared love. The revelation of David's double life coincided with a devastating health crisis that would test Mary's character in ways she never imagined. Within months of Mary learning about David's HIV status and infidelity, doctors discovered that his compromised immune system had allowed cancer to develop aggressively. David was facing a battle on two fronts: AIDS and cancer, with a prognosis that was grim. Mary faced an excruciating choice. The man who had betrayed her for their entire marriage was now dying and needed intensive care. Their daughters, who knew nothing about their father's secret life, expected their mother to stand by their beloved dad during his greatest time of need. Despite the devastating betrayal, Mary made the decision that would define her character. She became David's primary caregiver. For over a year, she managed his medications, drove him to endless medical appointments, helped him through chemotherapy sessions, and watched the man who had destroyed her trust waste away from diseases he had hidden from her for decades. "Why are you doing this?" David asked her during one of his lucid moments between treatments. "After everything I've done to you, why are you here?" Mary's answer revealed the depth of her character. "Because our daughters need to see their father cared for with dignity. And because, despite everything, the man I married is still in there somewhere, and that man deserves compassion in his final days." Caring for David while processing the betrayal nearly broke Mary emotionally. She was grieving the death of her marriage while simultaneously nursing her dying husband. She was angry, heartbroken, and exhausted, yet she continued providing care with remarkable grace. Lauren, Emily, and Grace saw their mother as a saint during this period. They watched her sacrifice everything to care for their father, never knowing the full truth about why their marriage had been so distant for so many years. To them, their parents' relationship looked like an inspiring example of, for better or worse, commitment. They had no idea their mother was providing compassionate end-of-life care to a man who had been living a lie for their entire lives. 2 years ago in late 2022, David Thompson passed away after his brave battle with cancer. His death created a complex emotional landscape that would challenge everything Mary thought she knew about grief and healing. To the outside world, David's death was a tragedy, a devoted husband and father taken too soon, leaving behind a loving wife and 3 daughters. The funeral was packed with friends, colleagues, and community members who remembered David as a good man who had fought bravely against a devastating illness. Mary sat in the front row, accepting condolences about losing her devoted husband and soulmate, while inside she was processing emotions far more complicated than simple grief. For Lauren, Emily, and Grace, their father's death was a profound loss. They had adored David, seen him as a loving, involved father who had always been present for important moments in their lives. Their grief was pure, uncomplicated by the knowledge that had tormented Mary for the past 2 years. While Mary genuinely mourned the end of David's suffering and felt sadness for the man she had once loved, she also experienced something she couldn't share with anyone: relief. For the first time in decades, she was free from the exhaustion of living a lie, free from caring for someone who had betrayed her so completely. Mary's grief was complicated by guilt that she wasn't devastated like her daughters, guilt that part of her felt liberated by David's death, guilt that she was already beginning to think about what her life might look like now that she was truly free to be herself. At 51, Mary faced a question she hadn't considered in decades. Who was she when she wasn't defined by her role as David's wife? For the first time since she was 24 years old, she had the opportunity to discover her authentic self, separate from a marriage that had been built on deception. Even after David's death, Mary carried the burden of his secret alone. She had decided that her daughter's memory of their father should remain intact, that they didn't need to know about his double life and the way it had devastated their mother for years. 1 year after David's death, something Mary had never expected happened. She discovered what genuine love actually felt like. Mark Reynolds, a 56-year-old widower from Greenville, South Carolina, entered Mary's life through mutual friends who thought 2 people who had experienced loss might find comfort in each other's company. The introduction was casual, a group dinner where no one was trying to play matchmaker. From their first conversation, Mary recognized something she had never experienced with David: authentic connection. Mark listened to her thoughts with genuine interest, asked about her dreams and opinions, treated her as a complete person rather than just a wife and mother. "I forgot what it felt like to be seen," Mary would later reflect. "With David, even in our early years, I felt like I was performing the role of the perfect wife. With Mark, I could just be myself." After more than a decade without meaningful physical affection, Mark's gentle touch was a revelation. A hand held during a movie, a spontaneous hug, the simple act of sitting close together. These small intimacies reminded Mary of what had been missing from her marriage for so long. Mark encouraged Mary to share her thoughts, dreams, and fears. He wanted to know about her career goals, her relationship with her daughters, her hopes for the future. For the first time in decades, Mary felt like someone was genuinely interested in her as an individual person. "Mark didn't just make me feel loved," Mary explains. "He made me feel worthy of love. After years of wondering why David had withdrawn from me, being with someone who actively chose to be close to me every day was healing in ways I hadn't expected." Within 6 months, Mary and Mark were discussing a serious future together. They talked about traveling together, possibly moving in together, building a life that honored both their past experiences and their hopes for the years ahead. For Mary at 53, the possibility of genuine partnership was both thrilling and terrifying. But Mary's newfound happiness faced unexpected opposition from the people she loved most: her 3 daughters. When Mary first introduced Mark to Lauren, Emily, and Grace, their response seemed positive on the surface. They were polite, acknowledged that he seemed kind, and said they wanted their mother to be happy. But their actions told a different story. The resistance started subtly. Lauren would schedule important family events during times when Mary had plans with Mark. Emily and Grace would create minor crises that required their mother's immediate attention, often when Mary was spending time with Mark. More directly, the daughters began expressing concerns about Mary's relationship timeline. Most widows wait at least 5 years before dating seriously, Lauren told her mother. Don't you think it's too soon to be making such big decisions? Emily was more emotional in her approach. It feels like you're erasing Dad's memory. Like our family didn't matter enough to you to take more time to grieve. Grace, the most direct of the three, simply said, "We're not ready for this, Mom. Can't you just slow down?" Mary found herself caught between two competing loyalties. On one side was Mark, who represented genuine love, emotional intimacy, and the possibility of happiness she had been denied for decades. On the other side were her daughters, whose approval and love she valued more than anything else in the world. What made the situation particularly painful for Mary was that her daughters' expectations were based on incomplete information. They believed she was rushing into a new relationship after losing a devoted husband. They had no idea she had been emotionally divorced from their father for over a decade, or that she had spent years caring for a man who had betrayed her fundamentally. To keep peace with her daughters, Mary began compartmentalizing her life in ways that felt eerily similar to David's deception. She would see Mark when the daughters weren't around, downplay the seriousness of their relationship, and pretend to be grieving in ways that felt appropriate to her daughter's expectations. "I found myself performing grief I didn't feel to protect my daughter's feelings," Mary reflects. "Just like David had performed love he didn't feel to protect our marriage. I was repeating the same pattern of deception just from a different angle." From Lauren, Emily, and Grace's perspective, their reaction is completely understandable. They lost their father just 2 years ago, and now they're watching their mother, who they saw as devoted to their father, seemingly move on quickly with someone new. Their resistance isn't malicious, it's protective. The daughters' memories of David are overwhelmingly positive. They remember a father who attended their school events, helped with homework, took them on vacations, and appeared to love their mother deeply. They have no context for understanding why their mother might be ready to move forward so quickly. Mary's decision to protect her daughters from the truth about David's double life, while admirable in its intention, has created an impossible situation where she cannot explain why her grief process looks different from theirs. Mark Reynolds finds himself in an equally difficult position. He's falling in love with a woman whose family sees him as an intruder, a threat to their father's memory, and possibly a manipulator taking advantage of a grieving widow. Mark has been remarkably patient, Mary says. He understands the complexity of the situation, but I can see the toll it's taking on him to be treated like a villain when he's only shown me kindness and love. The situation reached a breaking point 6 months ago when Mary's daughters issued what amounted to an ultimatum, forcing her to choose between her happiness and her family relationships. The crisis came during what was supposed to be a casual family dinner. Lauren, Emily, and Grace had clearly coordinated their approach, presenting Mary with a unified front about her relationship with Mark. "Mom, we need to talk about Mark," Lauren began, speaking as the unofficial representative of the three sisters. "We've been patient, but this relationship is moving too fast and it's affecting our whole family." Emily added, "We feel like you're not respecting Dad's memory or our grief process. It's like you've forgotten the 30 years you had with him." Grace was more direct. "We need you to slow down significantly. Maybe take a break from Mark for a while. Give us time to process Dad's death without feeling like you're replacing him." Mary sat at her own dining room table, looking at the three young women she had raised and loved more than life itself, feeling the weight of an impossible choice. How could she explain that she had been grieving their father for over a decade? How could she tell them that the marriage they idealized had been a lie? "If you choose to keep moving forward with Mark at this pace," Lauren continued, "we need you to know it's going to damage our relationship with you. We won't be able to be around him and family gatherings are going to be really awkward." The message was clear. Choose Mark and risk losing the closeness with her daughters. Choose her daughters and lose the first genuine love she had experienced in decades. That night Mary called Mark and asked for space to think. "I can't lose my daughters," she told him through tears. "They're the most important thing in my life, and if being with you means losing them, I don't know if I can do it." Mark's response revealed the depth of his character. "Mary, I love you and I want a future with you. But I won't be the reason you lose your relationship with your daughters. Take whatever time you need. I'll be here when you figure this out. For the past 6 months, Mary has been living in emotional limbo, maintaining distance from Mark to appease her daughters while secretly resenting the sacrifice she's making. She attends family gatherings, plays the role of the grieving widow who's slowly healing, all while knowing she's giving up the most authentic love she's ever experienced. Recognizing that the situation was unsustainable, Mary decided to seek professional help from Dr. Sarah Chin, a family therapist specializing in grief counseling and family dynamics. Dr. Chen's initial assessment revealed the complexity of Mary's situation. This family is dealing with multiple levels of grief and adjustment. The daughters are grieving their father while simultaneously adjusting to seeing their mother as a sexual being with her own needs. Mary is trying to balance her own healing with her daughter's expectations while carrying the burden of knowledge that would change everything if shared. Dr. Chin recommended family therapy sessions that could address the underlying issues without necessarily requiring Mary to reveal David's secrets. The goal was to help all parties understand that love and loyalty to a deceased family member doesn't require the surviving spouse to remain forever frozen in grief. Initially, Lauren, Emily, and Grace resisted the idea of family therapy. "We don't need therapy," Lauren argued. "We just need Mom to respect our father's memory and slow down her relationship." However, Dr. Chin was able to reframe the sessions as family communication workshops focused on helping everyone navigate this transition period together. During the third session, Emily made a revelation that surprised everyone. "I think part of why this is so hard is that I always worried Mom and Dad weren't really happy together. They seemed more like roommates than lovers for years before Dad got sick. Maybe I'm angry that Mom seems happier with Mark than she ever seemed with Dad." This observation opened the door for honest conversation about the marriage Lauren, Emily, and Grace had actually witnessed, versus the idealized version they had constructed in their memories. Through therapy, the family began working toward a compromise that honored everyone's needs. Mary would slow down the pace of her relationship with Mark. The daughters would make an effort to get to know Mark as a person rather than seeing him as a threat. All parties would work on communicating their feelings directly rather than through passive-aggressive behavior. They would establish boundaries that protected both Mary's right to happiness and the daughter's need for emotional safety. Through therapy and months of difficult self-reflection, Mary has undergone a profound transformation that goes far beyond her relationship with Mark. "For 30 years I defined myself entirely through my roles: wife, mother, caregiver," Mary reflects. "Even after David died, I was still trying to be the perfect widow, the perfect mother, always putting everyone else's needs before my own." The process of fighting for her relationship with Mark forced Mary to confront questions she had been avoiding. What did she want for her own life? What did she deserve? What did genuine love look like? "Mark showed me what it feels like to be chosen every day," Mary says. "With David, even in our best years, I felt like I was competing for his attention and affection. With Mark, I feel valued and wanted, not because I'm performing some role perfectly, but because he genuinely enjoys who I am as a person." The most significant change in Mary has been her willingness to set boundaries with her daughters, something she had never done before. "I love my daughters more than anything," she explains, "but I realized that sacrificing my happiness to manage their discomfort wasn't actually helping anyone. It was teaching them that love requires someone to give up their own needs." 2 months ago, Mary had the most honest conversation with her daughters that she had ever had. While she still didn't reveal the full truth about David's infidelity and illness, she did share something important. "I need you to understand that your father and I had problems in our marriage that you weren't aware of. We loved each other and we were committed to our family, but we weren't happy together for many years before he got sick. When I cared for him during his illness, it was out of duty and compassion, not romantic love. That love had died years earlier." This revelation helped Lauren, Emily, and Grace begin to understand their mother's perspective. They started to see that Mary's readiness for a new relationship wasn't about forgetting their father, but about finally having the opportunity for the kind of partnership she had been denied for years. Throughout this entire process, Mark Reynolds has demonstrated remarkable patience and understanding. "I've never asked Mary to choose between me and her daughters," he says. "I want her to have both, a loving family and a loving partnership. I'm willing to wait for them to find a way to make that work." Today, 18 months after Mary and Mark first met, the family has found a delicate but sustainable balance that honors everyone's needs and allows for healing and growth. Mary and Mark are officially engaged with plans for a small wedding soon. Lauren, Emily, and Grace have gradually warmed to Mark, recognizing that their mother's happiness doesn't diminish their father's memory or their family's legacy. "Mark will never replace our dad," Grace explains. "But seeing how happy he makes Mom has helped us understand that she deserves to have love in her life. We want her to be happy, not just be a sad widow forever." Planning the wedding has become an opportunity for the family to create new traditions while honoring their past. The daughters are involved in planning decisions, Mark is respectful of David's memory, and Mary is finally able to plan a celebration that reflects her authentic desires rather than others' expectations. Mark has earned the daughters' respect through consistency, patience, and genuine care for their mother. He doesn't try to be their father or replace David in their lives, but he has become a supportive presence who clearly loves their mother and wants what's best for their family. The experience of fighting for her right to happiness has fundamentally changed Mary. She's more assertive in all areas of her life, more aware of her own needs and desires, and more willing to advocate for herself. "I spent 30 years trying to be the perfect wife to a man who was living a lie," Mary reflects. "I spent 2 years trying to be the perfect widow to protect my daughter's feelings. Now I'm learning to be my authentic self and trust that the people who love me will love all of who I am." Through therapy and honest communication, the Thompson family has developed a new understanding of love, loyalty, and moving forward after loss. They've learned that honoring a deceased family member's memory doesn't require the surviving family members to remain frozen in grief forever. Today, Mary Thompson is preparing for her second wedding at age 55. With the blessing and support of her 3 daughters. Last month, the family celebrated Mary and Mark's engagement with a dinner that would have been unimaginable 2 years ago. Lauren, Emily, and Grace raised toasts to their mother's happiness, and Mark expressed his gratitude for being welcomed into their family. The wedding planning process has become an opportunity for Mary and her daughters to bond in new ways. They're shopping for dresses together, discussing venues, and creating a celebration that honors both Mary's new beginning and the family's shared history. While Mark will never replace David as the daughter's father, he's developing his own meaningful relationships with Lauren, Emily, and Grace. He offers career advice to Lauren, helps Emily with home improvement projects, and shares his love of hiking with Grace. Looking back, Mary often reflects on how different her life turned out compared to what she once imagined. She spent 3 decades building a marriage that was never what it seemed, then another 2 years grieving a man who had never fully belonged to her. And yet, from that devastation she discovered strength she never knew she had, and a kind of love she had only dreamed was possible. Today she is not the young bride who stood trembling with hope in a North Carolina chapel in 1994. She is not the exhausted caregiver who carried a secret burden in silence. She is not just a mother defined only by her daughter's needs. She is a woman who has survived betrayal, endured loss, reclaimed her voice, and chosen love on her own terms. For every person who has ever questioned whether it's too late to start again, for every parent torn between their children's expectations and their own happiness, for every soul who has lived in the shadow of secrets, Mary's story offers this truth. It is never too late to rewrite your story. It is never too late to choose love. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let go of who you thought you had to be, and finally become who you truly are.